With all the talk about AI and the ever increasing capacity and adoption of it, what's a voice actor to do? It's something that Alexander Devrient has been thinking about, and I don't think he's alone. So, Alexander, welcome to the Everyday VOpreneur Summer Series. What is your question, and how can I help you?
Thanks a lot, Mark. So yeah, probably been in the same boat as many other VO artists over the last couple of months, thinking how can we get ahead? How can we still sound as human and real as possible? So the question is, from your perspective, what can we do tangibly, skill-wise, in order to make sure that we stay ahead and that our voices sound as unique and real as possible?
You know, when we were kids, the thing that we were scared of the most was like the monster sleeping under our bed. And then when we started our voiceover business, I think the thing we were scared of the most was, what happens when I do a directed session and I can't get Source Connect to work. And now here we are wondering, how do we stay ahead of the robots? Can we stay ahead of the robots? How long will we stay ahead of the robots? And this is like the new monster under the bed. And it's a totally legit question that everybody is thinking about right now. And I know I have not played around a lot. Actually, I haven't really played around at all with AI from a voice and text to speech perspective. But from an LLM perspective, it's obviously getting a lot better every day. And so it's something that we need to be thinking about. And so the one thing that I would say, and I'm gonna steal and slightly paraphrase a line from Tina Marasco. I had her on the podcast recently, and she said that you're not a voice actor, you are an actor, period. To just take voice out of it and just focus on the fact that you are an actor, period. And I don't think in the context she was specifically speaking about AI, but I think the advice ultimately fits, because I think that the better actor that you are, the more humanness and storytelling ability that you bring to every script. I mean, you mentioned that right in your question, right? How do we sound more human? And I think it's being a great actor and being able to bring that storytelling to every script. And I think that the ones who are doing that at the highest level, I think those are the ones that are going to be there the longest. It's those subtle nuances in story that AI hasn't mastered yet. With the text to speech technology, AI can read, anybody can read, but it's being able to look at a script and figure out, what is the story that's being told here? Who is the person that I'm speaking to? What is the emotion that is behind this moment or this line? Or what is the attitude that this person is feeling as they're saying this thing or whatever? It's that stuff that I think that gives us as a human voice actor the edge. It's those subtle nuances and that storytelling that I think is ultimately going to be the thing that's going to keep us around longer. Now, how much longer? I'm not even going to try to venture a guess, right? Like, I don't know. I used to say, like 2 years ago, I used to figure, oh, we got at least 10, 15 years left. Now I have no idea. I really don't. I wouldn't even want to try to venture a guess, but I think that's one of the things that we really need to be focusing on.
That's great. Yeah, I think that makes total sense. It's something, I mean, personally, I'm an actor by trade anyway, so that helps. But what was interesting to see in general is also, clients' needs have changed and how they want us to deliver text has changed, right? And it has all gone towards the more, can you be like, imagine it's your best friend that you're talking to, right? Just keep it as natural as possible. Just don't be a voiceover. And it's interesting for people like us who've been doing voice for 15 years or 10, 15, 20, 30 years and who have certain patterns and certain ways of doing things. It's great because it means that we had to undo a lot of what we used to do anyway. And then it taps in very well into the state of where we're at now and what you've just described, right? To really honing that skill of storytelling and having fun with it. The only thing that I would ask, Mark, is that sometimes we don't have the time to prep in that way because, we're doing various different sessions, lots of different things at the same time. We get a script and then, so I guess it's up to us, right, to find the time.
I think that's part of it, but I think the other side of it too is I think it comes with your training. And so even for a trained actor, and I'm not speaking to you specifically here, I'm saying in general, for somebody who's a trained actor, not getting so comfortable in your training that you're just like, well, I'm a trained actor. Okay,
Mm,
when was the last time you trained? When's the last time that you worked with somebody who is a coach, who is relevant today, teaching what's going on today, teaching what's booking today, breaking down the reads and breaking down the direction that's being given today. And I think staying on top of that training, it starts to become a muscle memory, right? When I was a firefighter for 17 years,
mm,
and we drilled constantly so that when you showed up on scene, you didn't have to think about what had to happen. It's just instinct. You just knew what to do. You knew where the tool was. You knew what tool you were supposed to grab or whatever. And that
mm.
was just a result of just constant training and constant drilling. And I think the same could be said for the voice actor who's constantly working on their craft and skill, that in those moments where you've got to get things done quickly, the audition came, you don't have a big window, you'll be able to lean into that training where you can look at that script and relatively quickly you could pick 2 or 3 perspectives that you want to come from with that
Yeah.
script and be able to deliver it. I think the other thing that's really interesting, and I'm seeing this more and more, and I've talked about it with Karin Gilfrey and Tim Friedlander from Nava on the podcast in the past. We've talked about this idea of trust.
Mm-hmm.
And we already are very skeptical of everything that we see on the internet.
Mm.
It's so hard to know what is legitimate, fake news, disinformation, misinformation. We've heard those words a billion times and we're sick of hearing them. But that always used to be in the written word. And now that comes into play in audio and in video and in photography more than ever before. And there's a trust factor that comes into play here. And I'm seeing there are always going to be a set of creators who are going to adopt the latest tools and the latest technology. They want to, see what it's all about. They want to play with it, et cetera. And I totally understand that. But I'm also seeing a lot of creators, producers who are saying, no, we want to work with humans. We want to continue to create human content. And they're not saying that strictly from hiring a human voice actor. They're saying we want a human shooting video. We want a human actor. We want a human voice. We want human production. Like we want to tell human stories. And so I think there's going to be at least a segment of the production world that's going to lean into that as well. That are like, no, we use the robots for other things. Art is art, and we want to keep our art. And so I'm thinking that is certainly going to become a factor. But the other thing that I would say too is the voice actor who is just freaking amazing to work with in every capacity, right? If you are a pain in the butt, if you are hassling the clients, if you're slow to respond, if you haggle over revisions or every little pickup, or you're difficult in a session or whatever, why wouldn't I want to replace you? Like if you're a pain in the butt and you're not
Mm.
fun to work with, why wouldn't I want to replace you? But if you build a genuine relationship with me and you're responsive and you provide amazing service and we have an incredible rapport and we're working as collaborators, why wouldn't I want to continue and maintain that relationship? And so I think that becomes a factor as well, or I hope that becomes a factor as well. That's just another aspect of that human connection, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that rapport building, which is something that you talk about a lot anyway, right? About how to build that rapport, making sure that you are professional, that you turn up, that you do what you're meant to be doing, but also that you go that extra mile and that people really want to work with you again afterwards is a massive thing. But tying back to what you said earlier, the training element, because there was such a plethora of training courses out there and everybody seemed to want to offer you voiceover coaching, there was a little bit of an oversaturation in the market, right?
Yep.
But now it's actually more important than ever if you want to stay in that top 5 percentile, top 10 percentile, and you want to keep on working later to hone your craft as much as possible. And like you said, with relevant people. I was at a studio, just a tiny little anecdote, in Germany, like 8 months ago, working in Berlin with a client in the UK. And everybody was super happy by the end of the session. And that studio in Berlin happens to also be one of the biggest agencies in Germany. So I'm like, oh, great. Session went well. Do you guys want to sign me? Like, what do you reckon? And he's like, look, Alex, genuinely, like, you're you sound a little bit 2021. You know, you just listen to these two voiceover artists who are like top of their game German VOs, and just listen to how they deliver things. And then I ended up coaching with one of the two. So I did quite a few sessions with him. And that just, you know,
Yep.
was incredible. So never stop learning, keep on being curious, and yeah, hopefully we'll stay ahead at least a little bit.
Think about that statement. You sound so 2021. That was not that long ago.
No, I know, right?
Like to have somebody basically tell you that you're out of date at 2000, you know, you sound 2021. You're out of date. You sound 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah.
But that's a statement to how the industry is constantly changing and evolving. And it's also a very strong statement for why we need to make sure that we're staying on top of this. And, you know, I've had the good fortune of having a lot of really top talent on my podcast, and being able to kind of dissect what it is that they are doing that is help them to get to the level that they are at. And the one thing that comes up across the board universally, every top talent, I don't care who they are, I don't care what genre they're booking in, I don't care where they live, every single one of them across the board is constantly learning. They're looking for the next workshop, they're working with a coach that that they respect. Like they're and that doesn't mean like every week they're doing something different, but at least once a quarter, some of them once a month, are making a point of being involved in some sort of training that is hopefully going to give them something that will help them to stay ahead of their craft. And so, I mean, for a producer to tell you you're so 2021, I think every one of us would have to stop at that point and say, crap, when was the last time I worked with somebody? Oh, it was, 21 or 22. Like, it's been a couple of years. Like, we could be the one that's on the receiving end of that comment if we're not staying up on what's going on. And so I think, and that all comes back to acting and being able to deliver those human reads that they are looking for in 2025, and then making sure that when it changes next year, because inevitably it will probably change again, that we're still staying on top of it.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I couldn't have been more thankful for this comment. It stings initially because you've done everybody was happy. So you're thinking this was a great session,
Absolutely.
but then he was honest, and he just, and then that was an avalanche for things to come in terms of coaching, etc. afterwards. So, yeah.
And what a blessing for them to say that, right? Because not everybody would, and they don't have to. So for them to give you that feedback and you be able to take action on that, absolutely, what a gift that is. If I had to give one last piece of advice, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about myself as well, because we're getting inundated with all this AI stuff every single day. And lately it feels like more and more I go on social media, I go on Facebook, and there's another voice actor talking about another job that they've lost to AI, or another job that's, requesting AI, or another client who wants them to make an AI voice or whatever. And we look at, Google had their IO event recently, and they introduced VO3 and incredible video content that's being created as a result of that, right? And we see all of this sort of stuff, and it is really easy to start to get massively stressed and to start to feel that worry and start to feel that anxiety over your career and what's going to happen and what does the future hold. And I don't think that we should be oblivious, but I also think that we need to avoid getting too sucked up in the hype that this is some sort of massive existential crisis. When something new comes out, it's always very exciting. Doesn't matter what the technology is. There's always the shiny object syndrome. Do you remember last year when the AI tool, the AI hardware, the Rabbit came out, and it was introduced, and everybody in the world was talking about this thing. Like, this was going to be it. This is the future. This has changed the game. iPhone's over, blah, blah, blah. That lasted about 3 weeks, and nobody bought it. And all the hype was for nothing. I think we went through this, what was it, back in December maybe, when DeepSeek came out, the LLM DeepSeek came out, the stock market cratered. Like this
Mm.
was the existential threat to every AI company in the world. Stock market loses trillions in value, like mass hysteria and panic. And it's, a few months later, and like, when's the last time you heard somebody talk about DeepSeek?
Mm.
It just didn't pan out. And I'm not saying AI is not going to pan out. Obviously, the technology is here and it's just going to continue to get better. But I think that we are only doing ourselves a disservice by getting too sucked up in some of this existential threat narrative that is out there, particularly in the voiceover community. And maybe it's naive, or maybe it's optimistic. Maybe that's the optimistic Canadian in me. But even if that is the case, I know for me, I would rather come into my business every day. I would rather walk into the studio, sit down, send an email, talk to a client, send an audition, record a job, whatever, with joy and gratitude than walking into the studio with a feeling or an emotion of anxiety and stress
Fear.
and
Mm.
fear. And
Mm.
so I would, like I said, it's not about being oblivious, but it's about having a little bit of perspective. Because I think if you're walking around living in this constant fear of AI, tell me that's not going to be a factor when you go into the booth to record an audition or a booking.
Mm. Of course.
Like that is absolutely going to come through when you walk in the booth and record. You're going to hear that and feel that in your read. And so I would rather just come in thinking, look, I'm really good at what I do, and I've worked really hard at it, and I've trained really well at it, and I'm just going to deliver the best that I can deliver. And I mean, I've said, I don't know, it was probably 2 years ago when I did my first podcast talking about AI, and my philosophy then is the same as my philosophy today, which was I'm going to make as much money as humanly possible, as long as it's possible to make money as a human. And that's what I'm going to focus on.
That hopefully will in our lifetime, and hopefully a few lifetimes to come, will still be a thing that we can make money as humans, and that it's
Absolutely.
we've not been completely replaced. But that thing of controlling the factors that you can control, right?
Yes.
Just focusing on what is within your grasp, within your power, and just
Absolutely.
holding on to that, and it makes a huge difference in terms of your mindset and the positivity you come in. And in the acting world, they used to tell us the same thing. If you have desperation written on your forehead when you come into the casting space, it's often
They will
difficult
sense
for
it
you
from a mile away. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I think that's great advice. Even though it seems really straightforward, it's not as easy to apply, but it's a good reminder. It's just something that almost you can say it as a mantra,
Oh, 100%. We need that reminder every day. Put it on a Post-it note, hang
Put
it in
it
the booth in
wherever.
front of you. Yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, Alexander. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and asking your question. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight from, what little bit of insight that I have into the subject. It's something that is going to continue to grow and evolve over the years to come, but we'll certainly stay on top of it. But in the meantime, we focus on what we can control, and we be better actors, I think.
Thank you very much. Refreshing amount of positivity. I love it. Thank you so much.